Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. Today, Kenny Santucci tells a story. Kenny is a Jersey guy like me, but that's where our similarities end. He made a name for himself nearly 20 years ago on the MTV reality show The Challenge. Kenny's wiki page describes him as a ladies' man and more than your average meathead. Now, his successful run on the show ended abruptly amid some controversy, and we'll touch upon that. But it's what he did afterwards that I really want to get into today. He's parlayed his reality fame into a career as a popular fitness instructor and gym owner in New York City. Now, full disclosure, I've known Kenny for years, but we haven't chatted in a bit, so I figured now is as good as time as any. Kenny, welcome, bro. How are you?
Long time, buddy. I haven't seen you in so long, and I'm glad to hear you're doing pretty well. Living down in Charleston. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm jealous.
I got no complaints, Kenny. And I always like to say, especially people that work in media, like the only time you ever really have a chance to catch up with old friends is if you're doing something, if you're creating something. So I'm using this podcast as an excuse to catch up to you because I think it's been a good 4 years, maybe 5 years since we've seen each other.
Yeah, at least, right?
So part of the podcast and what I'm doing, Kenny, is I want to hear people's stories about how they got to where they are because everyone's got a story. And I want to go way back with you because one of the things that you and I both share, which is it's very limited. We both have like immigrant families. We both did CrossFit and stuff like that. But outside of that, you're handsome, you're fit, you got everything going for you. But one thing that you and I both have in common is that we were both fat kids growing up.
Yeah.
And you talk about this all the time. So I'm not just bringing this up to be like, hey, remember when you were fat?
Yeah.
You talk about this all the time. You post about it a lot. And I know for me, and I'm writing a piece about this, is that my childhood as a fat kid made me who I am today. It helped me build that armor, helped me sort of create, I guess, confidence in myself, even though I shouldn't have. So can you take me back to what you remember about your struggles with weight and how it's sort of informed who you are today?
Yeah. You know, a lot of people think I talk about it just to like be like, oh, look at me, I'm in great shape now. But I think it helps you. You know, it could have been one of those things where you say, oh, poor me, this was my crutch, my parents are fat, no, I'm fat, I can't get out of this cycle, this downward spiral of, genetics and blah, blah, blah. But I actually use it as a tool, and I use it as a learning tool for other people as well. You know, I realized at a young age that I was uncomfortable, I didn't feel good in my own skin, and it helped propel me into the career that I'm in. You know, me being heavy as a kid has kept me so driven that still, 30 something years later, I'm still doing the same shit, only because I love it. Like the transformation, like what I felt the worst about in my life, I made into the ultimate positive. So for me, it's like in hindsight, the best thing that ever happened to me was being heavy as a kid.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like my sense of humor developed because of me being the fat kid, because it's hard for people to make fun of you if you're already making fun of yourself.
Exactly. And it's so surprising to me this day and age that so many people get so upset when, they get made fun of. But you've opened yourself up to getting made fun of. And when I was heavy, I was just like, well, they can't make fun of me if I'm already making fun of myself.
And so you grew up, you got fit, obviously. And this is kind of funny. So nowadays, when kids grow up, they want to be YouTube stars or influencers. When you and I were growing up, it was like you want to be a TV star, movie star, and then right around the pocket of your spry early 20s, reality television was the launch pad to fame and fortune. And one of the things that people from that era probably talk about now is like, dude, you don't get rich from reality shows. Basically it's a very low fee for appearing, and it's what you do with it after you've appeared on the reality show. I mean, the Jersey Shore people are great examples of this. Although towards the end, I'm sure they were making pretty good bucks from MTV. But talk to me about how you were able to parlay you being on Road Rules, I think what it was, like using that to take the next step in your career. And how were you able to use that? Because I think that's at the end of the day, now people who are doing reality shows, it's all part of their business plan. Like all these Real Housewives people, like I'm doing this Real Housewives show so I can launch a beauty line or a new a skin care or something like that. So how did you transition from doing the reality show to what you're doing today?
Well, I think I was around at a worse time because social media wasn't a thing, right? I was on television from 2005 to like 2012. So it was this like 6-year stint that I was there. And it wasn't as lucrative as it is now, right? There was no social media. People weren't paying you to do ads and all this shit. Whereas nowadays, like you were saying, the housewives are like, oh, I'm going to go on this show and then it'll build my social media and then I could launch a book, a makeup line or whatever the fuck it is. And for me, it was just like, it was still very traditional at the time. I got to do some hosting. I got an agency out of it. I was going on a lot of castings. So for me, it was still very traditional, very old school, like, we once remember it. But it allowed me to realize that like that wasn't what I really enjoyed doing. I think when you find what you love to do on a daily basis, because we're all going to get up and do something, right? You're either going to get up and create content, you're going to get up and shoot a podcast, you're going to get up and train people. It doesn't matter what it is, but everybody's going to kind of have a similar routine every day. For those out there that think every day you want to get up and sip margaritas and live your own life, it's like, well, then you live life without a purpose, right? Like some of the most fucked up people I know, some of the richest people I know. There's a reason why all these rich kids are fucked up on drugs. Like I've had so many clients who are the children of rich parents who come in and they have drug problems and they're unhappy and they're unfit and they just feel like they kind of drag through life because they really don't have a purpose. Whereas like people like us, it's like we didn't have that luxury of having nothing to do. We felt the pressure of life and we had to create a purpose. So one of the things that I always say in the gym is like when you take pressure and purpose and put it together, then you start to really make a difference in your life and in other people's lives, because every job is a job of service. If I'm a bus driver, if I'm a chiropractor, if I'm a hotel manager, it doesn't matter. We're all leading a life of service. And it's like, what is that service that you love to do on a daily basis that helps other people and that keeps you happy? I heard this great explanation this weekend, a selfish service, because it makes you feel good on a daily basis, but you're still serving other people.
That's great. And I know your time in reality didn't end well, and we're not going to go there, but I was curious about when you found a thing that would be the thing that you would do for the rest of your life. And I know fitness was it. And I know you've tried multiple things and you have a strong business, pardon the pun, strong New York, but how did you realize like, okay, cool. I know what I love. I know my purpose, like you mentioned. How am I going to make money out of this? What steps did you take at that point?
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to the TV thing, I mean, it was an abrupt ending. It was kind of fucking shitty how it all shook down. Was it ideal? No. But at the same time, I put my head down at night every night knowing that's all bullshit. But aside from that, I realized that even when I was filming, even when I was on a show, when we were filming a show, when I was doing hosting, I really didn't enjoy the day-to-day, right? The day-to-day, like very up and weight shit sucks, right? And you're sitting around and you're confined to, like nowadays with a podcast, you can fucking say whatever you want. You have a little bit more autonomy to do and say whatever you feel. But back then it was like, it was very restricted as to what I could say and do and everything else. And I'm like, oh, this is fucking annoying. So nowadays it's like, I got to kind of create my own business the way I'd wanted to do it and the way I see fit. But I thought to myself one day, I was sitting at my desk when I was still working at the port at the time. And I'm sitting at my desk and I'm like, if I could be anywhere else, I wouldn't be sitting in a studio filming a show. I would be in a gym working out, right? And I'd want to hang out there because I always loved the environment of the gym. If I held myself accountable and was always in the gym, I wouldn't have an excuse as to why I didn't work out. So for me, that was the driving force. So I said to myself back in 2009, 2010, I was like, I'm just going to get a job working out. And that's what I'm going to do. And if I can make money from it, I will. If my father had his way, I would have became a cop. It just had zero appeal to me, still doesn't. And I ended up taking the police exam. And I was like fighting with my father for months. And I was like, I really don't want to do this. I'm going to go become a trainer. So you're not going to make any money being a trainer. And then fast forward 2012, 2013, I opened my first gym in Jersey. And I loved it. And my dad and my uncles and shit were there every day helping me put together. And I tell everybody, I probably lost 70, 80 grand fucking opening that place up. But for me, it was a good learning experience because if I would have went to Harvard Business School, it would have been a lot more than 80 grand.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's so funny. I joked about our similarities, the immigrant background. And, it's always like the safe job. And, I obviously do a lot in the world of entrepreneurship. I work with entrepreneurs. I produce, business podcasts. And one of the running jokes I have when I talk to entrepreneurs, Kenny, and you're one of them, obviously, I say, you're all nuts. Because to be an entrepreneur is just crazy. It's literally like standing at the edge of the mountain and doing the leap of faith. Where did the entrepreneurship gene come from? Because obviously it didn't come from your family. Is it just because the self-ownership, like you're like, I want total control of this. I don't want to sit around for someone to tell me what to do. Like I can do it what I want to do. Where did that come from?
To tell you the truth, me and my siblings, as much as we're similar, we're so different. I'm not like one of these fucking zodiac people, but all my 3 siblings are all born in July. I'm born in April. They're all right-handed. I'm left-handed. They all went to school for like business management and things like that. I went to school for art and design. Like I moved to New York. They all stayed in Jersey. I was always the outlier. I was always different. And I knew that I couldn't work for anybody else. Like I'm not a good employee. So I'm like, if I don't go and work for myself and figure this out myself, I'm never going to have a job. I've been, and this is real statistic, I've been fired from every job I've ever had. So it was.
What was the shortest one, Kenny? Was there one that you're like, that you were there, lasted like a day?
So funny you say that, and it popped right into my head. My cousin worked at Joey's Surf Club in Lavallette, New Jersey. You know the spot. It doesn't get much more Guido and fucking Italian New Jersey than that. And my cousin gets me a job. I was 18, 19 years old. I was wrestling in college at the time. And he gets me a job bouncing at Joey's Surf Club. I'm working the door with this other guy. These fucking 3 hot girls come up to the door. And they're like, this is night one. This was like the Friday night. It's basically like 18 and over night. And I'm 19 at the time, so this is great for me. These 3 hot girls come up and they're like, could you get us in? I go, absolutely, for sure. I get them in. The guy who was the head bouncer was like good friends with my cousin. He's like, dude, your cousin's out of here. Fuck him. He just let those 3 girls in. So I was employed for about 3 hours, maybe.
Oh, that is awesome. What a great story. All right. So obviously club work was not for you.
No.
And other jobs didn't work out. And like you mentioned, so when you mentioned the risk you took opening that first gym, the 70, 80K you lost, what do you feel like when that happens? Because when, Kenny, when you go to Atlantic City and you bet like you lose a couple $100, like, oh man, I feel like crap, but it's only a couple $100. But what's it like when you're losing that, essentially maybe your life savings at that point? Like what's going through your head?
I had put my heart and soul into that place. And, it was just like television. Like I was settling into that space and being like, all right, I'm going to be here for the next 10 years because I signed this 10-year lease and I want to make this the best place possible. And I have my family there and my friends there and everything. I was doing everything in my power to make that place work. I was doing guerrilla marketing. Like when I wasn't teaching class or in privates, I was going to the mall and passing out flyers. I was going to local businesses and like connecting with different business owners to get people through the door. I was donating my time. I could tell you where every fucking stitch of paint was in that place and every nail that was put down. And it was like losing a child. I mean, I don't know how devastating it would be to actually lose a child, but it was hard for me because it felt like something that I built and I took care of was just taken from me. And it was hard. And we ended up going through a 2-year lawsuit. I ended up getting my money back, not all of it, but most of it. But it was hard. And it was just like, I was like, all right, I'm never going to do that again. I'm never going to have partners. I got to keep my distance. Fast forward, a couple months later, I get asked to help open this other gym here in New York City. And they were like, listen, we want you to help us manage the place. I was like, no shot. Pay me a premium to coach. And at the time, I was probably getting more than every other coach that I know of to teach a CrossFit class. And it worked out really well. And they're like, hey, listen, we want you to manage it and we want you to take over. Within 6 months, I was running this new gym that was my gym in Jersey was probably worth $280, I think, at all said and done to open the doors and everything. This gym was almost like $3 million to open up, 10 times the price it was for our other space. But it was cool and it ran really well. And then I had some shitty partners again, and everybody gets fucking greedy when there's cookies in the cookie jar. Again, another great learning experience. And I was like, after that, pandemic hits, and I would go, I'm just going to fucking do this on my own. And here I am 3 years later into technically 5 years later running my own shit. And I'm like, knock on wood, it's pretty good.
So what else did you learn, though, other than bad partnership? Because I'm sure there were some other growing pains along the way outside of like the partnership. Was there something that you feel is like that, it's one of those things where I always felt like my mentors, Scott and Todd, I would like steal like the good stuff, but I would also like bank like the stuff I didn't like what they did. I'm like, oh, I don't like the way they did that. I'll do it differently. Was there something that you learned in those first few experiences that you're like, okay, I ain't doing that again when I'm the captain of this ship?
Yeah. I was just at a mastermind 2 weeks ago down in Miami. I got invited to go to this mastermind. It was really cool. And it's just all business entrepreneurs. I was the only like fitness person there. Everybody else was like, it was the guy who started Comic-Con, the original writer of the X-Men cartoon in the 90s and stuff. There was a guy who started Quest Bar. There was a guy who's a real estate mogul. So there was a lot of different people with different backgrounds. And I was really the only fitness person there. And it was just a reinforcement of like, you can't spend more than you're making. You would think it's common sense and like everybody should be doing that. But in both gyms and both businesses that I was a part of, it's fucking insane to me. I go, we can't have all this overhead and not make more than the overhead is. A buddy of mine just opened up a gym and he has 12 fucking employees. I go, buddy, your payroll is more than you make in a month. You can't hire people until you're making X amount of money. You got to go like stripped down, bare bones. You got to be mopping the floor and fucking working the front desk, doing all the sales shit and teaching class and doing all that stuff. I go, you're going to go broke in 6 months. I go, because that overhead's always there. No matter what happens, you got to pay those employees. You got to pay your rent. You got to do all this shit. And it's so funny to me, especially even big business, right? You hear these companies that go belly up. You're like, was no one watching the fucking books? What the fuck was going on? It's like so stupid. And I go, I'm probably a terrible businessman, but not half as bad as some of these fucking stories I hear. Like, it's common sense. Like, I hear so many companies that go under so quick because they didn't even think about it. It's like, before you open anything, a restaurant, you should already be putting out the buzz. You should already be collecting memberships. You should already be sending out emails. Like, those are things prepping you for the day you open up. You don't want to open up and then start doing shit. So those are two things that, like, in both businesses, I was like, hey, we got to start selling memberships beforehand, or like letting the word out. Oh, but we're not open yet. I go, what are you, fucking idiot? But the day we open up, we should have like 30, 40, 50, 100 people. People should know about it, right? So it's stupid.
And it's funny, Kenny, because you talk about how you've learned on the job. Like, you've basically, your MBA class has been failed businesses and doing it right.
Because I'm an idiot.
We're all idiots.
Because I learned the fucking hard way. I went to the school of economics, but it's like, it's the best way to learn, because as soon as that fire burns your ass, you're like, oh shit, hot, I shouldn't do that again. But so many people, it's like, because they went to school and they're like, well, I learned it out of a book. It's the same thing with training. It's like, I could have went to school for what I do for a living now, exercise science and everything, but it doesn't give me any practical knowledge as to what it's like to work with certain types of people. And it's not even so much like understanding how to get somebody to squat, but it's understanding how to get to work with different archetypes and different personalities. That's what personal training is all about. I mean, I know the biggest idiots in the world who have pretty successful fitness businesses. They don't know anything about training, but they're just personable people and they get along with people really well. A couple people on social media I could show you right now who I'm like, this guy's a fucking idiot. He's just a good personality.
It's so funny. And you talk about the personal part of personal training. And, you and I both spend a lot of times in gyms. You spend more time than I have, but you'll see the personal trainer with the towel over their shoulder, sitting down while the person works out. And obviously, those types of PTs give you the rest of you a bad name. But unfortunately, it's a low barrier of entry, as you know, to get started. It's, passing that ACT test or whatever the hell it is that you have to pass to be a trainer. But those are the people that probably make your skin crawl, right? Those, when you walk in a gym and you see that.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of like anybody who was born with a decent body, right? Like girls and guys alike. You're naturally thin, and they're like, well, I should be a trainer because I look this good. But you don't know how you got there. You don't know why you look that way. For you to help other people do it, there's no empathy there. You don't know what they're going through because you've always looked good. And I think there's a level of understanding. Like if you said to me, hey, Ken, my dad passed away in 2019. Your dad passed away, let's say 10 years ago. When you say to me, oh, hey, I know what you're going through, it means a lot more to me because I'm like, oh, fuck, he knows what that feels like. My mom, thank God, is still with me. I don't know what it'd be like to lose my mom. I know what it's like to lose my dad, but I don't know what it's like to lose my mom because they hold two different places in your life. So my dad, I know, would have been like, be strong, don't cry, shut the fuck up and move on with life. Whereas my mother, it would be 10 times more devastating because it's your mom, right? So I don't know what it's like. So for me to tell somebody who lost their mom, like, oh, I bet that's hard. It's like, yeah, there's sympathy there, but there's not empathy. Like, I don't really know what you're going through. It's much harder to deal with.
Yeah. And you know, what's another thing too, is like your personality, obviously a big driver, whether it was in your reality days, doing hosting to now being a gym owner, but the switch, it's a lot of time it's on. I know this, like when you're out in public, you've got a huge following on social media. How do you connect with people on a constant basis where you don't drive yourself crazy? Because you always have to be on, because Kenny Santucci is the Kenny Santucci they know from watching, Road Rules, the guy on Instagram, the guy at the gym. But sometimes Kenny Santucci needs a break. So how do you turn that off? Or does it ever get turned off? Because I know I drive my wife crazy sometimes because my switch is rarely off. But do you turn off Kenny Santucci? Is Kenny Santucci at home right now different from the guy that we're going to see out in the street or doing squats or doing something on television?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I always turned it off for television because I understood from day one that we're there to make TV, right? And I always, every time somebody asks me about that, they're like, could you turn it on and off? And I'm like, yeah, I always think of that old Monster Ballads commercial where they say every bad boy has a soft side. So it was all like the ballad songs from the fucking 80s metal groups and shit, because you can't be that guy all the time. I love listening to Iron Maiden and Motley Crue and shit like that. When I'm in the gym, I need that energy. I need that feeling. When I'm at home, I have to turn off. Like, I don't like having a ton of people around at home. As I've gotten older, I've become more and more of a curmudgeon for sure. By the time my day's over, like yesterday, I started at 6 a.m. By the time I got home, it was like 9 p.m. And I'm like, I don't want to fucking talk to anybody. I don't want anybody around. I think that's a huge reason why I'm still single, is because I just don't want to come home and somebody be there and not understand that it's like, well, you don't want to talk to me. It's like, I don't want to fucking talk to anybody. If Christ came off the cross right now and wanted to sit here and chat with me, I don't want to talk to him. And I think that there's a lot of people like that. I think when you're constantly on, if you work in real estate, if you work in television, if you work on a gym floor, like you're talking to people, you have to be engaged because your job is to entertain people. Your job is to be on and be in a good mood. So like when you get home, you got to turn that power grid down and you got to chill out for yourself. Like a lot of times I like going to, like, whether I go to the gym or like go do jujitsu or go to a sauna or something like that. It's like, I just need to be left alone or do my own thing or zone out on something else rather than just constantly be entertaining people.
Yeah, I guess that could be tough. Although at the gym, I guess that dial is even turned up even higher, right? Because not only do you have to be personality, you also have to be loud as AF.
I have to be the owner, right? Like I don't ever want people to come in. I always think about like, how would I want the owner to treat me if I was in a gym, right? So I love the type of person who, there used to be a juice shop I used to go to in Jersey. And this guy would walk in and he's handing out juices and he's talking to everybody. He's sitting down at every table. And even the fucking people he didn't know, this guy was such a schmoozer. And then there was this old Italian guy who worked at this Italian restaurant that my family used to go to. Again, same guy. He's like, knew everybody's name. He's high-fiving people, and I always admired that guy. And I'm like, that's the guy I want to be, because I could be in a shit mood and he's going to put me in a better one. That's who I want to be for other people. I don't want people to come into my gym. I want to elevate that hour for people, because that's what I want people to do for me.
And you mentioned earlier that, one of your failed businesses that you were looking at, it was like a 10-year plan. It was like, man, I'm going to put my roots down. I'm going to run this gym. It's going to be successful. It didn't work out that time. But now it seems like everything's working out for you. Is there a Kenny Santucci 10-year plan with your current gym, or do you see yourself maybe you're saying, hey, after a while, I'm going to hand the reins off to the next Kenny Santucci. Have you thought about that far ahead?
No, this year when we did Strong New York, I was sitting up on stage with Don Saladino and Gunnar Peterson, who in my opinion are two of the best trainers ever, hands down. They've worked with celebrities. They've been in the game a long time. I mean, they've been doing it for 20, 30 plus years, better than everybody else. And they're doing the thing, right? So there's people who say all the time, they're like, well, you can't be a trainer for the rest of your life. But these guys have been doing it longer. They're both very well off. They still continue to train people because they enjoy the art and the craft of it. When you look at a football player who has a hard time leaving the field, right? Like any type of athlete, like there's a part of me that really enjoys, a large part of me that really enjoys being on the floor, helping people out and being engaged and watching this process happen, getting somebody better. So I never want to let that go. And I want to hold on to it as long as I possibly can. I always said, I'm going to be in a gym every day. I hope I fucking drop dead in a gym. And I hope it's my gym. I want to own the gym that I die in. It'd be nice to have multiple gyms, but on a daily basis, I don't look forward. I'm looking at right now. I'm like, how could I make the best relationships? How could I make the most of today? How do I stack up as many wins as possible today so that tomorrow becomes easier and that all those things just start to flow into place? I don't have a 10-year plan. I just try to operate as high level as I possibly can on a daily basis. And those things just fall into place. One of the things that I put on a lot of shirts and, write to a lot of people, like when they ask me for advice and stuff, take care of the little things and the big things take care of themselves. I need to have a plan as to how I get 10 years down the road. And it's taking care of these little things. Well, I'm going to continue to eat well every day. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to train as many people. I'm going to say yes as many times as I possibly can. I'm going to try to get as many people to smile as I can. And all right, now I've won 10 times throughout the day, right? And I'm going to train as much as I possibly can and everything else. And I'm going to take as many courses as I can. And all these things will start to add up. And then that 10-year plan just becomes what it is because I've done everything right up to that point. I was just telling a guy today, he was like, dude, you go to jiu-jitsu so much. I'm like, I'm going to do this tournament in April. And I go, I want to be able to walk out on that mat and be like, I worked out every fucking minute I possibly can. I've done as much as I possibly can. I don't want to have any excuses. I don't want to say, oh, poor me, I lost because of this. It's like, no, fuck that. I did as much as I possibly can, and I'll continue to do as much as I possibly can. In my opinion, what was done to me 10 years ago because of with the show and everything, it was like that was out of my control, but I take responsibility for putting myself in that position. And it sucks what happened, but I could have either fucking sat there, cried, and done a bunch of drugs to forget about what happened, or I could just move on and do something that I love and start racking up those wins. And rack up is the best advice I could give anybody is to rack up as much wins on a daily basis to get yourself in a good position. And then you could start to continue to win. Like little wins help you move forward.
Can you lay one more nugget for folks who may be listening to this that want to make a career in fitness? Because, obviously, we joked earlier about how social media is a different game. So you could basically become a fitness star just with social media. But you dropped some awesome nuggets there. But if a kid came up to be like, hey, Kenny, I want fitness to be my life. I want to make a living. I want to be like you. I want to die in the gym one day when I'm 80 years old or 90 years old. What word of advice would you give them?
Well, I got this young kid who actually has recently come to me. He's been coming to the gym pretty often. He's 21 years old and he's like, I want to do this. I want to do this for a living and I really want to make this happen. He's like, how could you help me? And that's the stupidest question you could possibly ask, right? That's the worst question. If I'm coming up in the ranks and what I'm doing right now with my event is the first question I ask any brand that I work with, any speaker, or anybody I could work with, I'm like, how could I help you elevate your game right now, right? Because even the most successful people in the world want to be more successful, right? If you ask Jeff Bezos or fucking Elon Musk, they don't need any more money. They don't need to work anymore. They want to level up their game. So how do they level up their game? They go on fucking Joe Rogan's podcast. They work with different other brands and collaborations. So it's like, what could I do in my power? Because if I don't add any value to their lives, then they have no reason to be around me. So you need to figure out how you could add value to someone that you admire's life. One of the things I wrote down in a notebook 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I said, I want to add value to the lives of the people that I respect and look up to. And if I could add value to their lives, then I'll be able to increase my value, because now I'm in this circle of people that have, in my opinion, more worth than I do. And people are, oh, everybody's got the same amount of worth. That's bullshit. Every girl out there is listening and wishes they had as much value as a fucking Kardashian. I wish I had as much value as a fucking. But there are people that add value to their lives. Their assistants, their friends, their whoever it is in their circle, their managers. Like, there are people who add value to their lives and do things that they can't do. So there's always room for you to enter somebody's orbit and help them grow. So if you want to work with a certain individual, you want to be in a certain place, try to get in those circles and add value to people's lives.
Love it. That's awesome. His name is Kenny Santucci. Kenny, for folks who want to get a hold of you, try to find out more about you, where's the best place to look?
At Kenny Santucci on Instagram. I share most of my information there. And then at Strong New York, October 5th, it's going to be huge. It's a full-on health and wellness expo. It's an opportunity to hang out with some of the best in the health and wellness space. We have doctors, nutritionists, neuroscience trainers. I mean, you name it. It's everything health and wellness. Great food, great people. It's a day just to celebrate yourself and wellness here in New York City.
Awesome. Kenny, thanks again for the time, man.
Thank you, buddy.
And that's today's Good Listen. I'm Joe Pardavila. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila or TikTok at J Pardavila. If you want to reach out, feel free to shoot me an email at joepardavila@protonmail.com and tell me your story. Lastly, I would really appreciate it if you could please leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.